The PlayStation 5 Dev Kit leaked, and is LockHart still a thing? What's up everybody, Brad here, and earlier this week, well actually late last week I should say, the PlayStation 5 Dev Kit leaked, and if you hadn't seen the patent application, which I'll throw up here, you'd be like, hey, that looks really familiar because it looks exactly like the PlayStation 5 development kit, which you can see behind me right here. It's got this like V-shaped design, it's got vents on the side. That's so that the device can be stacked, and that way when it's stacked, the heat can still properly vent, because these devices, let's face it, are probably running a bit hotter than they will when they probably ship to the consumers sometime late next year. But there you go, that's the PlayStation 5 development kit. There's nothing all that, we didn't really learn anything else. I mean, this is quite literally the only thing we have seen of it. But Sony, of course, has already shared specs about resolutions up to 8K. Of course, the Xbox Scarlett would do that too, but they also talked about the storage, ray tracing, a little bit about the controller and some other things. So it's not a complete mystery what's going on inside this box, but expect to see Sony talk in much more detail, probably around the E3 timeline, about their next generation PlayStation, where hopefully they'll announce the availability, potentially the pricing, but definitely some more raw specs should be coming out around that time. So there you go. There's your first look at the PlayStation 5 development kit, probably one of the only looks you'll see, because most people don't actually get to see the development kits with their own eyes. But other things on the agenda here. So if you jump back into the time machine, I talked about LockHart many times, and it was supposed to be a lower entry into the Xbox Scarlett family, right? You're going to have Scarlett, which we know is the high performance one. Then there was LockHart, which was a lower priced, lower performant SKU. And so we talked about it, and Phil Spencer at one point was talking about consoles, and so it seemed like this was going to be their two SKU approach. But then sometime around the middle of the summer, Phil kind of came out and said, hey, no, we're not actually going to do that, or it didn't sound like they were going to do that. But then here we are talking about it once again. So I've heard from too many reputable places that LockHart might not really be gone. I don't know if it was ever honestly truly gone at this point. I just think that their marketing strategy and go-to-market strategy is evolving. And the problem is that one source actually said, hey, it might be talked about at XO19. It obviously was not, and there's a reason why I don't really talk about things unless I'm super confident, because that would have been a really bad rumor to get started. But the problem here, or the challenge I should say, is that I'm hearing from too many different independent sources that LockHart is still a thing, and I don't know why that just changed. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe the PlayStation 5 does not want to talk about LockHart either. So, anyways, I'm hearing from too many different sources that it's still around. And so here's we're kind of read between the tea leaves here. You had talked about new future Xbox consoles, plural, but I think you're talking about Project Scarlett in the singular now. We've heard about this Scarlett Lite or Project LockHart. Can you put to bed and say you're definitely not making that? Or are you still doing new Xboxes, plural, as you've said in the past? And then Phil responded to that question. Will I say we're not doing something, meaning LockHart? We're focused on Project Scarlett and delivering a high performance console. There's no doubt about that. I will never remove options for us. When we launched the Xbox One, would I have predicted the S would have come, or X would have come, or the all digital edition would have come, which frankly is doing well, which is good to see. We also did just ship the development kit, which is another console. So a lot to unpack there, really a lot to unpack there. One is that the development kits are now shipping. That's not a big surprise. I mean, is anybody really going to be shocked if there's a new Forza title that comes out when the Scarlett comes out? But obviously Microsoft is working with their partners and getting those development kits into their hands to help them start working on that stuff for the next generation launch. The second thing to take away from there is that he very specifically called out the all digital edition is doing well. I think a lot of people missed that when this interview went out. I personally did too, but he said, hey, we're doing well. No, granted, they're not quantifying what that means. Is how many units sold, how are they comparing it, what is the metric for doing well? I mean, is it on store shelves? Yeah, then it's doing well. But is it actually selling? Well, according to this, it does sound like it is in fact selling. But the more important thing here is that I think he's specifically calling out the all digital edition, which does not have the disk drive, is doing well, which means consumers that are warming up to that idea. And the reason why this all ties back into LockHart is that LockHart, at least from my understanding, did not have a disk drive either. It was that, again, lower performant, lower GPU, lower CPU clock, potentially smaller amounts of RAM, to give a more like 1080p experience rather than the Scarlett's 4K gaming experience at a lower price point for those that need it. I think he could be priming the pump there a little bit to get more people thinking, hey, like maybe this console isn't really sad, as the acronym points out. But he also doesn't really come out. He doesn't like. He does a good job of dodging the LockHart question. All he's saying is that we're not saying no, we would never do it. Obviously, these plans are not public, so Microsoft is never going to acknowledge these things, at least not yet. Sometimes they do later down the road. But the way the question is asked, it does leave the door open to LockHart launching, which somewhat aligns to all the information I've been hearing that, hey, they're still talking about it, in which honestly, this might be the actual real news here, is that Microsoft may not know. Right? They are at least, well, roughly, let's say a year away from launching. And they're roughly, I'm talking in rough timelines here, about 6-ish months away from mass production of the console, something like that, which means that they're probably around 3-ish months away from doing early engineering, where they build the assembly line, get it produced, and then they do all the testing and make sure everything's good, and then tweak it, and then it goes to mass production, which means that there's still things that are extremely fluid in this world of console hardware. Microsoft probably hasn't even made the full decision yet about the final specs and the console launches, meaning LockHart, because things can still change. Yes, they can ship out development kits, but those things get tweaked frequently, right? They typically set a bare minimum, and then they can optimize and do other good stuff and make the PCBs more efficient and all that. You guys know how development works, so I'm not going to drill into that. But what the point here is I don't know if Microsoft is fully locked down if LockHart's shipping or not. It's still a thing inside of Microsoft. I just don't know if it's a thing that's going to ship on day one, but it's definitely still a thing. So while LockHart may not show up with Scarlett, it's not dead either, and it could show up at a later date. I think that's what Phil's point here is like, hey, we launched this console, and then they effectively launched 3 other ones, right? They had the S, they had the X, and then they have this development kit that's out there. And they have the all digital edition. Actually, that's 4 if I could do my math correctly, but there's 3 in the Xbox One family. So there you go, guys. Just keep your kind of heads open and eyes open and ears open, I should say, for LockHart information, because I think we might start to hear more about this. Really, I think some of the bigger leaks, candidly, will start showing up right when that thing goes into engineering prototyping or early run sampling, which is in roughly 3 months, because once those things start hitting manufacturing lines, that's when all that good information will start flowing at a much more reliable rate. So that's all I've got for this week, guys, or this week, I should say today. Happy Monday. We'll catch all of you right back here next time.